Hello again. This is Ben from Preamp, and today we're going to go over two concepts. First of which is wrapping your cables. Second of which is tying your cables. The two ways we do it. And I'll explain why we do it both ways. So, first up, we have two 25-foot cables here. We have a 25-foot 5-pin DMX cable and a 25-foot AC Edison to Edison cable. I'll start with the DMX, and yeah. Essentially, just for general knowledge, the way we tie cables in the industry, and I don't think anyone will really disagree with this unless some venues here and there will have their own ways of doing things, but the way we do it for the road is called over-under, and essentially all that means is one loop, whatever your FAR connector is, or your slack, is going to be over the current loop, and the next one's going to be under itself, sort of. I'll show you what that means when I get to that. So first, why do we do this? One, it keeps your cable straight in the coil, and that helps preserve your cable for way longer than if you just over, or I don't know who on planet Earth unders, but if you did that, it would also destroy your cable. What this does is, so then over, you're turning the cable one way, and then the under, you're turning the cable the other way, so all the like little nylon strands on the inside are staying the same direction throughout the whole coil, sort of, which helps preserve the cable. So another cool thing of why we over-under is when you go deploy the cable, it unwraps itself. So if I'm doing this, and this is a bad example because it's like that, but see how that falls perfectly straight. And you can I'm a little bit off camera, but the cable falls totally straight instead of not that, which is the case with like over. You either have to go like this to get it, you have to use like a spool to undo it or something. So that's kind of that. So what I'll do is I'll just take this connector, and you can't really see it on the floor, but this is totally straight already. And the way to start with this cable for coiling, and it would normally be in this way already because it'll be like on a stage, in a run, on a truss, whatever, is you want to make sure it's mostly straight on the ground. So just go like this a couple times, right? Just make sure, know where that connector is so you don't lose it, and then just toss the whole thing on the ground, right? That'll do you good. Next step, if this thing focuses, is you get this end, and you grab this, and you just bring this up and coil it and rotate it like the normal way to do it. You take it, you twist it this way, and you bring it to the loop. The next one, you have to grab like this, so you have to put your hand under it, and then you're bringing this part of the cable, you're bringing that under the next loop. So how that looks is you're bringing that under this loop. So like, see how this cable is now under that? That's your under loop. So again, this is your over loop because this loop's going to be over the connector or whatever, and then this is your under loop because this slack is going under that loop. And that's really all there is to it. Just to show that one more time, you take the cable, you bring it this way, and you just meet it up with the coil, and there you go. That's your loop. And you do that a couple times, right? Get quicker the more you do it. Little knot here and there doesn't kill anything. Sometimes people will extra slack, we'll just pull this one a little bit extra, and then we'll bring it in like that so it's easier to grab next time. Also indicates which end to start with, because if you grab this end and you bring it through the coil, you're going to get a bunch of little knots throughout the coil, which is super duper annoying. But yeah, from here we literally we use these things from Elite Core called Bongo Ties. They sell a million different types of these on the internet, but all you do is you bring the rubber little thing around and go like that, and your cable's tied. Doesn't really stress out the connector at all because it's not very tight. Same thing, everything's the same for a power cable. It's just a power cable is a little bit beefier, but this is actually easier to do than a coil loop, especially by hand, because it doesn't like stress out your arms at all really. And I'll also get to how this little tieline thing works in a second. But again, with power, you just, the same thing. It falls perfectly straight, and it doesn't have any knots in it whatsoever, which is super cool, because if you're like doing like a 100-foot run or something, those knots will, actually, you know what, this might have been a better one, but it's okay. See how quickly that straightened out? Yeah. In a 100-foot run, if you get knots, that is a lot of time that you probably don't have to fix all those knots. And we've run into things where we've like done a 200-foot run with like 2 individual hundreds, and then we had to spend like, well, I had to like put someone on duty just undoing the knots, and that's like really not a good use of time. So same thing here. So first loop is just like this, second loop is just like this, and there you go. There's the start of your thing. Keep on going around and around, and then it'll basically coil itself at a point. You just have to obviously guide it, but it like the cable wants to coil this way because there's nothing fighting you. Whereas in a over loop, there absolutely is something fighting you. That is, all the nylon stuff is like retracting and whatever against itself, which is not good for the cable, one, and also just annoying. So yeah, that's how we do power. Again, same thing. Same thing goes for, I mean, a 5-foot, you can choose to do this. It doesn't really matter at 5 feet. Once you get to 10 feet, you want to start over-undering, and then obviously everything up to 250, unless you have a coil crank thing. So for tying, here's where we start. So I'll take this tie off, and this piece of tie line's like 2 feet long, probably. And what you're doing this thing called a close hitch, which is a term you might be familiar with, just a type of knot. What you're doing is you're taking the cable and you're twisting this guy over here. So this part in like your right hand, if you're doing it right-handed, is going over this one, and then the left-hand one is gonna go like this, right? So you now have this kind of shape here, and then if you slip that over the connector and you pull it tight, now you have a connector with a little tie line in it. And then what you do is you just flip the cable over, and don't have to do this that fancy. You can just give it literally a shoelace knot, or whatever the formal name for that is. Give it a little bow, and you're done. That's how we tie power. And now on to why we use tie line for power. And we actually use tie line on XLR too, and we use bongo ties on DMX. Well, first of all, we started with everything bongo tie. They're lower profile than tie line. You know, they contract because they're rubber. So putting them in cases and stuff, you won't have stuff flying around if one gets untied, whatever. And also, the tie line you gotta cut, and you don't want to cut tie line, and you don't have tie line. Those work. And at a point, we didn't cut that much tie line. You know, now we have a loaf. But you know, we work with what we have, and now we've switched all our power and XLR to this type of tie. And we actually really like that we did that, because it just performs, everything about it's better. It holds better. It won't break. We've broken bongo ties before. And yeah, that's really that. Why do we still use bongo ties here? Again, they're lower profile and whatever, and we also have like 100 and something of these, and we don't really want to switch all of them. But also, that's personal choice. If I was starting out again, it's hard to say if I would have preferred tie line on DMX or not. I think this current method of tie line being beefy on beefier cables, even XLR is a little bit heavier than DMX sometimes. I like tie line on power and XLR. I like bongos on DMX. It's personal preference, is what it is. Yeah, so I hope that this clarified over-under slightly, because it's a little bit weird when you're getting used to doing it, and I hope this got you thinking of, if you run a little production facility and you are thinking about tying with little plastic things, or I wouldn't say zip ties, but what are those things? The like Velcro. We have a bunch of Velcro cables too. Everything about Velcro, one thing to say there is that dust and little debris does get caught in the Velcro, which is not fun to clean. Like, you have to replace them every once in a while, and they break as well because they're way more fragile than either of these actually. But yeah, these are my personal. These are what Preamp uses for every cable, and they're fantastic, and they make life possible. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed or took something away from this video, especially if you're struggling with over-under coiling, or if you're struggling making a decision between what should I tie with what, or whatever. So yeah, this has been that, so I will catch you guys next time. Peace.